We have an hour together this afternoon or this evening, depending on what time zone you're in. And I wanted to offer a few introductory comments before we get into our conversation with our guest this evening. My name is Alison Griffin. I am a Senior Vice President with Whiteboard Advisors. We are a social impact agency that works at the intersection of entrepreneurship and public policy. And I co-lead our higher education practice. And I am based out of the Denver, Colorado area. And about 2 years ago, authored a short piece and called the Rocky Mountain West, One DuPont West, if you will, because of the large number of higher education associations and policy organizations that are located out toward the Boulder and Denver area. And that not only caught on and was used to reference sort of that growing community, but has actually been the foundation for a network of colleagues that have been connecting and collaborating across Colorado for the last almost 2.5 years. And when the pandemic hit, certainly 18 months ago, we've all been impacted in different ways. We wanted to keep our community of colleagues and partners growing and talking with each other. And one of the ways we found to do that was actually to host monthly book talks. And so over the course of the last number of months, we have been hosting book talks with a number of authors across the higher education and workforce policy spaces. And that has actually allowed us to include colleagues from well beyond the borders of Colorado and certainly bring authors and notable guests to a community that may not regularly engage with national thought leaders if we are place-based for the time being. So with that, I'm thrilled this evening to have Jamie Merisotis, president of the Lumina Foundation, join us for a book talk. I have had the great pleasure of both knowing and working with Jamie for, I'll say, probably well over 10 years. We probably don't need to reveal dates in that context, but I asked Jamie to join us for two reasons. One, certainly to talk about his new book, and we'll get into the details of that, but to also reflect on some of the greatest challenges that are facing higher education as he has seen over the course of the last number of decades. Some of you may know Jamie from his leadership, his philanthropic leadership with Lumina. Others may know him from his leadership and vision around the Institute for Higher Education Policy. But whenever I think of supporting our most vulnerable, low income and underrepresented student voices, I always go back to the work and the foundation that Jamie has laid for those learners. So thrilled to have you this evening, Jamie. Thank you for saying yes to joining us. And we'll get
delighted to be here. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. One quick logistical note, we are expecting a relatively larger crowd than what we have had in months past. And folks tend to join, during the, I guess, happy hour, depending on where you are, or the dinner hour. And so I would ask if you have a question for Jamie, would you please enter it in the chat? You can either enter your question or you can just note that you have a question and I'd be happy to turn to you to answer or to ask that question. I'm going to start off with a few questions of my own to get the conversation going. And then about halfway through our time together, we'll turn it over to a back and forth with our audience. Jamie, does that work for you?
That's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. It's more like having a cup of coffee together, Allison, and hopefully others will benefit from our coffee talk.
Perfect. I love a good coffee talk on a Thursday afternoon. So I'm going to start off with this question, actually, before we even get into a conversation about the book. As I just noted, you have been a national thought leader in post-secondary education for decades, most notably inspiring and influencing the nation's commitment to a post-secondary education completion goal. Would you talk a little bit about what inspired your career in post-secondary education and policy?
Yeah, so much of these stories, it's the story of millions of Americans, which is your own experience, has something to do with what you end up deciding to work on in your career. I was the first in my family to go to college, and had the good fortune of having parents who didn't know what college was, except for one thing, which is that we were going. My brothers and I were all going. I have three brothers, and it was their life commitment, even though they didn't quite understand what it was. Come from an immigrant family, and they were very, very committed to this idea that their task was to help us do better than they had been able to do, by making sure that we had the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we needed. So, I describe myself as lucky, that I had that good fortune. I also benefited from the fact that I went to a college, Bates College in Maine, that provided extraordinary support, financial aid, counseling, tutoring, mentoring, all of those things that are so critical. I'm a walking advertisement for every financial aid program you can think of, from Pell Grants and student loans to community-based scholarships, work study, you name it, I did it. And so when I graduated from college with a degree in political science, and I realized that I wanted to work in not, I was also a student journalist. I actually was the editor of the college newspaper at Bates, and had spent my summers in Washington, D.C. working in journalism. And so wasn't quite sure if I would work in journalism or in public policy, and realized that I didn't want to spend my career observing social change. I wanted to be a part of it. And so I went to Washington and found my first job, which happened to be in the Washington office of the College Board. And I realized that I was in the job about 6 or 7 months, and it dawned on me one day that I was a research assistant, a policy researcher for a tremendous researcher named Janet Hansen. And I realized that the research I was doing was about people like me. It really didn't occur to me until I was into the job that that's what my job was all about. And that was the moment, Allison, where I said, I want to make sure that the strategy going forward for the country isn't about luck, which is what my strategy was, but that we actually have a plan as a country. And so that's how I ended up in my pathway from policy analyst to national commission leader to think tank founder to now the CEO of Lumina Foundation. Now, amazingly, I know some of you who are participating today, some of you will be surprised to hear me say this. I'm in my 14th year at Lumina Foundation. So amazing.
14, we'll say 14 short years, but
yes,
quite impactful. And as I noted just in that question, really shaped the conversation that we've been having nationally, I'd say for over a decade, about the importance of completion. And so thank you for your leadership there, the investments certainly that the foundation has made, but also the policy framework that has been established in states across the country. That is such a critical component to the future for all learners.
Thank you. The key from Lumina's perspective is that, when I came to Lumina in 2008, I was actually a grantee of Lumina Foundation, and Lumina was doing very good work when I got here. And what I realized was that we had to leverage the expertise and the knowledge of this national foundation towards something bigger, which is where the attainment goal came from. And ultimately to see ourselves not just as a grant making entity, which of course we are, but as a leadership organization, one that is actually trying to catalyze large scale change using all of the tools in our toolbox, the grant making, the public policy influence, the ability to be an impact investor. All of those things have become very important in terms of us trying to live the values of the foundation and ultimately try to lead through our ideas, our resources, and our ability to leverage change, among others.
Well, thank you for that leadership. So we're going to transition to a conversation about your book. So Human Work is the second book that you have written in the last decade. Tell us about the premise of the book, why you believe the time is right to recenter our conversations about the future of work and our place in the changing employment world.
Well, let me say first, I had no intention of writing a second book after how hard the first one was. I was a student journalist, and I have done a lot of writing in my career. I ran a think tank. Writing a book is a whole other scale, particularly when you're running a national foundation. And my book in 2015, America Needs Talent, was a sort of brain dump of 20 years of ideas that I had about framing the talent profile for the country through higher education, immigration, urban policy, a variety of other things. And I thought, good, I've written the book I always wanted to write. But I apparently was a glutton for punishment because I started to talk about these ideas about this question. And it was really, Allison, a question that you and I get, maybe many of the people participating today get, but I was getting on a more frequent basis, which was, so Jamie, what's education really for? What's it all about? Why are we so invested as a society, as global societies, in education? And I was compelled by that question because I think that these conversations that we're having right now about the cost of college, about the questions about whether there is value in college, is ultimately rooted in this idea that we are preparing people for something. What is that? And my conclusion was that we are preparing people to do the work that only humans can do. That at the end of the day, we know that work is changing in unprecedented ways because of technology and artificial intelligence. But I believe that our task in education has to be to distinguish us as humans from the machines. We know what the machines are good at. They're good at repetition, at pattern, at speed, at reducing things to algorithm, and ultimately performing tremendous service on behalf of us as the humans. But machines can't understand subtlety or nuance or how to interact with other people. And so, my view is that this idea of human machine complementarity, that what humans are good at is complementary to what machines can do and vice versa, was really the vision that I tried to offer here. So, human work, if it's the work that only humans can do, really means that we've got to focus on preparing people for the things that make us compassionate and empathetic and ethical, that allow us to be critical analysts, that force us to be effective personal communicators and to be creative and to collaborate. Those are the things that I think we need to be preparing people for. And, at the end of the day, I think that, we're different than the machines in a lot of ways, but the fundamental difference between the machines and the humans is that for us, work matters. We work because we seek dignity and purpose. We work because we want social mobility and personal satisfaction, and we want the meaning that comes from work. So that's what the book is all about, and what I try to lay out in the book is what that argument is all about and how we can hopefully move towards that human work paradigm.
So that really, it resonates with me on many levels, but really honestly resonates with me as a parent, now raising two preteen boys, and thinking about the human element of what they will be doing in their future. And now, given the fact that you have spent a significant amount of time in the post-secondary space, what elements of human work have to be, I guess, reared or influenced or supported with a younger generation of learners? I'm just thinking about everything you just said, and all of those characteristics and qualities of being human are really formed at a much earlier age. So can you talk a little bit about how what you wrote about and your work in the post-secondary system actually connects back to our younger learners?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right about that point too, that this is a continuum. One of the things I talk about in the book is this concept, this notion of, if that people talk about machines, they talk about the machines do deep learning, where, they drill deeper and deeper down using these algorithms into data sets. And, one of the arguments I make in the book is that humans are wide learners, right? And we learn because in wide dimensions that include time, people, and content, right? So the time part is really important to your point about early learning earlier in life, right? Which is that this idea that learning is like a fixed phase of your life and working is then the next phase of your life is wrong, right? that this notion of wide learning has to take place. It has to start early, and it has to continue throughout the worker's life cycle. That's really important. Of course, it's got to be diverse in terms of people, and ensuring that we are actually serving the diversity of race and ethnicity and gender and immigration status and all the other factors that reflect who we are as a society, because the system won't work unless it reflects the fact that we are all sharing in the benefits of the human work that we all do. But that part about the content of the learning that you're asking about, I think is really important, right? That we've got to start in the beginning with seeding these ideas around empathy and ethics and building these collaborative models. And, so you think about the ways in which we've talked about education at the K-12 level and the higher ed for many years. And you think about the fundamental concepts of things, like the Montessori models, et cetera. And, those things will be increasingly important. We will need numeracy and literacy and all those things. But what we need is people who are adaptable, people who are actually able to continue to evolve and change and rethink their ideas as technology takes on more and more human tasks, and as technology becomes more and more of a complement to what we're doing. So we're going to need to focus more and more on building those critical thinking and problem solving and communicating and all of those human traits and capabilities very early. I talked with lots of roboticists and artificial intelligence experts in working on this book. And many of them said, the media narrative on this is wrong. It is really wrong. We are not developing machines that have artificial intelligence. What we are developing is machines that are almost intelligent, that mimic human intelligence in certain ways. But what we should be focusing on is not teaching our 3-year-olds to code. We should be teaching them how to be better collaborators and communicators. We should be teaching them the fundamentals about compassion and empathy. Those are the things that are going to serve them long term. Over time, they're going to develop those other skills that will complement those things. But having that base and then continuing to develop those human traits and capabilities over an entire working lifetime is going to be key to the human work experience.
Absolutely. That again, that just really resonates with me both as a professional and also as a parent. So thank you for addressing that question. I want to transition a little bit and talk about the current situation in the country. Our unemployment rate over the last year has hit its highest point since the Great Depression. Many employers and employees are feeling the pain, of course, of this seismic shift. The influence of the pandemic, expected to be felt for a generation at least to come. So as you think about what you learned in writing this book, the ideas you're thinking about, what are some of the predictions you have for the future? How might our economy, our workplaces, just our work life look different given the notion of human work?
Well, let me say first, let's start with COVID, right? So my book literally came out in the middle. I actually finished the book just as COVID was hitting. So if you've read the book, you'll see that I do reference COVID in the book, and then the book came out in the midst of the pandemic. But the pandemic itself and what we've learned from the pandemic is in some ways the slowest moving train wreck you could ever see coming, right? That what we learned in the pandemic about the criticality of frontline workers, about how those frontline workers are overwhelmingly women and people of color, about how they are disadvantaged in this marketplace, both from an educational perspective and a work perspective, was really amplified because of COVID. And in some ways, more people began to understand why remote learning and remote work was so much harder for people who didn't have access to technology, who didn't have the resources, who didn't have the prior experience, and why they were forced into these situations that put them at risk or that led to learning loss. So on both sides of the learning and working equation, it's pretty clear that we learned a lot from COVID that was really an acceleration of the trends of what we saw before COVID. I think we also learned that this idea that, again, was starting before COVID, but I think has been accelerated, is that the shift in the system is increasing, where it was focused mostly on the providers of learning, the educational institutions and the employers, and more towards the workers and the learners, right? So when you think about what we're looking at in this post vaccine world, we'll call it, I don't know if we're ever going to be out of a pandemic in the near term, but the post vaccine world, what does that look like? And people are very interested in the sort of, old model and quote unquote, getting back to what we did before. Of course, what we did before wasn't very good for an awful lot of people.
Right.
Or this wholly online remote learning and working model. Both of those I think are interesting and important, but the real action is going to be in the middle, right? The real action is going to be in the hybrid learning and working experiences. And this is where the development of these human traits and capabilities will be increasingly important, because learners and workers are going to need to be adaptable. They're going to need to be individuals who actually can be as empathetic online as they are in person. They are going to have to demonstrate their ethical capabilities, not just by their physical actions, but by what they do in terms of how they use social media and what they're doing in terms of the way in which they're interacting with each other in these virtual contexts. So those things I think will be really, really important, but they are lessons that I think have been driven home by COVID, and that have been accentuated by the pandemic.
And so then as a result, your observation, where have you seen institutions, not higher ed institutions, just institutions, small I institutions, falling short in addressing the challenges that have been brought on by the last 18 months, but also where have you seen some successes that have been, or may be ripe for scaling or replication?
Yeah, if you look at certain industries, you can see that some industries, the places where we've recognized the sort of heroic actions of people in healthcare, for example. But healthcare is a really good example of an industry that has actually advanced because of this pandemic, right? That how many of us have now been through telehealth experiences who had never been through them before? And so from an industry perspective, those institutions are better because they are delivering higher quality service, because they're using the technology and focusing their in-person interactions on the things that really matter, on the things that are really important. So that's an example of an industry that I think has benefited from this terrible tragedy of this pandemic, that I think is going to serve us long term. And I also think many employers in the last 18 months have learned a lot about the centrality and the need to be explicit about racial equity and racial justice, in part because in the midst of the pandemic, the murder of George Floyd, which of course we know in the modern historical purposes, those kind of events were frequent, but because there was a pandemic, more white people paid attention, right? We were actually more focused on this at a global scale, and employers responded to that in ways that I think will have long-term implications in terms of how they are investing in their workforces and what they are doing to actually make sure that their workers are better served. All of their workers are better served by working in diverse environments. I've talked to so many chief human resource officers since the book came out who said, this idea that we are preparing human workers, that we are employing human workers, is something that's very real to us now in ways that was probably more abstract before the pandemic, because we saw the humanity of people in this pandemic in ways that maybe we didn't before, thinking about how are we filling these jobs and what are the job descriptions, what do they mean, what do they represent. There's certainly a more human element to those conversations.
Absolutely. I keep reflecting on the last 18 months and the fact that we have truly seen each other's humanity, right? Whether that is the, whatever's hanging behind you, or the child or the pet or the partner that's moving about in your space. But I also think what it's done is given people a little bit of courage to actually show up authentically in their workplace and in their work life. And I think it goes to the qualities of human work that you describe, and, being a little bit more transparent about, I have a commitment with my family, or I have this thing I have to juggle with my schedule, and, not trying to hide behind some of those things, but being a bit more authentic in who we are as humans and what we bring to the workplace.
No, I think that's absolutely right, and it shows up in big ways and small, right? I think being more aware of each other as workers. I have found at Lumina as an employer, as an organization working with a terrific group of colleagues, that our care for each other grew dramatically because of this pandemic, and the human nature, the sort of personal nature of life really expanded as a result of the pandemic. And there's also small things like, so we are not back to the office yet at Lumina, but we have reopened the office and allowed people to come in if they want to, and we do have people coming into the office. And several people have observed that post pandemic, Jamie doesn't wear black leather shoes anymore. And I said, well, that's because I hated those damn things before, and I'm certainly not a more effective CEO because you see me in black leather shoes. I'm going to wear my Allbirds, thank you, and I'm going to still do my job and be
That's right.
comfortable in my jeans and my my comfortable shirt. And that's just the way things are going to be. So it's big things and small that I think are really important that have come out of
Absolutely.
this.
No, absolutely. I love talking with colleagues about the silver linings. So I think we've definitely hit on some of those. I'm going to pause. There are a couple of comments in the chat that I want to make sure we get to because they are relevant to the conversation. Then we'll turn back to some questions or questions from others. But Marilyn, you had the first comment or question in the chat. Marilyn Smith, would you like to ask Jamie your question? We have Marilyn.
Sure. I'm here.
Great.
I don't know
Thank
if you
you.
can see me or not.
Yes.
I'm very interested in this. I had a son who is not alive anymore, but he was a lawyer, and it was all about kindness and compassion. And a lot of the comments remind me of that. Sorry about getting emotional, but I have been, I'm a recently retired CIO from a university, Chief Information Officer, and I see a lot of roles that need changing. And I see emphasis still on STEM education, and that's on coding. And then I wonder what the parent's role will be, what the university role will be, what the employer role will be. And if he can comment a little bit on what the model is going to look like in the future and how we can help contribute toward building towards that model to emphasize humans and human interaction.
Yeah, it's a wonderful question, and it's a complex question. Obviously, I think that we are on the front end of this, and I think we are going to see a lot of things change here in the next few years. I mean, we're many of us are in the post-secondary space, and we're sort of trying to figure out what is the role of post-secondary education in this new world where we saw dramatic declines in enrollments in community colleges, et cetera. What will the future of this look like? I think we can speculate till the cows come home, but I think at the end of the day, it's hard to predict where things are going. What I will say is that many of the leaders that I've talked to in higher education have expressed a sort of, I think it is a sincere and deep desire to deliver the learning in a different way as a result of this experience. I have heard very few who have said, what we really want to do is just snap back to what we were doing before. And part of it comes to this point that you're making, which is that we've got to be delivering learning in a different way to better prepare people for work that clearly is going to be different. And that's a big change I've heard from college presidents, from faculty and others, that there's a recognition here that the situation's got to change. At the same time, I think that we have a growing crisis of confidence in the system itself. And by the system, I not only mean higher education, but I think, fundamentally in institutions, right? And again, a trend we saw before COVID, but our faith in the corporate sector, our faith in government, our faith in higher ed institutions and lots of others was shaken as a result of this pandemic. And we are going to have to earn that back. these institutions will have to demonstrate how they are doing a better job of having caring workplaces, of having, compassionate approaches to post-secondary learning. I think those things will be really important to do. But at least from the higher ed side, I've heard a deep desire to get there, even as many leaders are nervous about the sort of threats that they face in terms of declining enrollments and questions about resources.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. I also, Lanice Smith, I saw that you had two questions. One related to parents and getting school-age children back on track, given some of the mental health challenges, and then also an experience about being first Black in the workforce. Would you like to ask one or both of your questions of Jamie? Oh, and we might want to jump off mute.
I was just giving you all the accolades. Sorry. I was like, thank you for pronouncing my name right. Yeah, no, you asked it. So I'll just let him speak because that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the issues of learning loss and, what you mentioned in the chat, which is the issues around, so we've lost the ability to socialize many of our in what we would typically have done in the early child development phase, I think is going to be really, really important. And there, I honestly think that this is a case where we are going to need resources in order to be able to support this. There just is no way that we can expect low income and particularly low income people of color to be able to do this on their own. There's just too much complexity. This is a big lesson from COVID, right? So I think that's going to be really important. The mental health part is outside of my area of expertise, but I will say that, I know what I have seen through the lens of my own children, 18 and 13, and through what I have seen from lots and lots of research-based evidence that we have a significant mental health challenge on our hands in K-12 and in higher education, whether it be for, the youngest learners or the adult learners and everyone in between. I think it's pretty significant. And I think that's part of what's playing out right now, Lanice, in terms of the sort of confusion in the marketplace about, wait a minute, I'm vaccinated, but now I hear about this Delta variant and I'm not sure what I should be doing. And that is totally understandable, right? Because everyone's mental health was so challenged in this environment. I think it's going to be critical to focus on this. The issues that you raised about being a first Black, I think are really, really critical and are going to be I think accentuated in the coming years. Having inclusive work environments is not something that is about the making these work environments more inclusive for the white people that are there. They are about making these work environments inclusive for everyone. And understanding that, I think, is an important part of what, I speak now as an employer, what we as employers need to understand. I'm fortunate to say that Lumina is a reasonably diverse organization. We have over 40% people of color on our staff, but that doesn't mean that we are happy with that number. What we want is the results that come from that inclusive work environment for everyone that works at Lumina. And for those who are the pioneers, who are the first, we better be providing lots and lots of support to those individuals, because they're taking a risk that I think ultimately is in service to a greater good, but we owe them the support that they deserve for seeking those opportunities.
I just want to thank you for sharing that. And I obviously I asked this question in open forum in a mixed company because it's a discussion, right? And I wanted you to be able to respond to it because of where you are in your position. And then I just want to add this last thing, Alison, and I'll stop it.
No, you're fine.
And having been the first Black a number of times in many scenarios, it is not like I fought it a lot. Like I said, it's, this is not an honor. Like you have to go up against all these work norms that people feel, well, your opinion, well, you have an attitude and tone. I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just having a voice, but it doesn't fit a narrative. Or you hear, oh, she's the token hire, or they had to hire someone this color. And people may think, oh, there's no such thing as racism. But I'm telling you, like, this is our lives. You know, if you've ever been the first, or flip it and be the only white person that goes into a predominantly Black, you'll feel the same thing. And we will share a cup of coffee together like none other. But I just wanted to bring it up because these things in my heart and my head and opinion is what should be discussed on some level. And then I'm done.
No, I'm so glad that you raised all those questions, and thank you for being vulnerable and putting yourself out there in this forum. That's actually the greatest thing about the community that we've been creating through these talks, is hearing perspectives from colleagues and folks across the country who enlighten and inform the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take a quick break. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was going to make one quick comment, which is that, so I consider myself a lifelong learner. And so I'm on my own journey like anyone else is. And I learned a lot about the perspectives that you have when you are coming from a majority perspective, and the perspectives you have when you are coming from a minority perspective, through lots and lots of the work that I've done in my career. So I spent part of my career when I was in Washington, D.C., spent a lot of time in South Africa working as a policy advisor to the government of South Africa, and seeing a majority Black country and understanding the complexity of what happened to a subjugated majority population for a century was extraordinary to understand how you build your way out of that. And of course, it's still a work in progress, right? Seeing what I saw in 2019 when I lived in London, a city that is becoming rapidly more diverse than it was. Americans think that, I think many Americans have a sort of 1980s view of London. And London is an incredibly, 4 out of every 10 Londoners now is Muslim. And that's an extraordinary fact that I think many Americans don't understand. So seeing how cultures address these issues from, again, in our worlds, right, in learning and in work, is really interesting and important to me. And I've learned a lot from those experiences. So
thank you. Thank you for sharing. And Lenise, thank you for your questions. I was going to say, I'm going to take a pause from the chat because a couple of points that came up in the conversation that we were just having actually extend back to some policy related issues. And Jamie, of course, you and I both have deep roots in policy at both the federal and state level. What is the role of public policy in embracing a more human-centered approach to work? Is there a role?
Yeah, well, first, I've worked in public policy. I still consider myself a public policy wonk, even though I'm now in philanthropy 14 years. And, I have a nothing but hair loss to show for it. I'm glad to see that didn't affect you, Allison. The work that I've done in states at the federal level, working as an advisor in other countries, one of the things that I've come to understand is both the opportunity that government presents as a part of the solution to large scale systemic problems, and also the limitations. And so I view 2021 as a unique public policy moment, perhaps unique in my experience in the sphere, and perhaps unique for the foreseeable future. And part of that has to do with the fact that the pandemic created this window where there is already, because of the Recovery Act, massive federal money that has flowed out through both K-12 and higher education, and in workforce training and lots of other things. And the potential that might come through probably a reconciliation process or busting the filibuster, whatever it's going to take for new investment in what the president had proposed in the Jobs and the Family Act, I think will be really interesting to see. So we could look at 2021, Allison, as a high watermark, a 100-year flood of federal funding. So that's so at a top line level, we could say, okay, well, that's the good news, right? So there's probably going to be more money, or at least the prospect of more money is better than it's been for a long time. That's the good news. The question is, what are we going to apply it to, and how will we actually use those resources? And if we use it to prop up the old system, which was not equitable, which didn't serve people very well, which didn't support the innovation that we need as we see the nature of work rapidly changing, then we are going to miss that 100-year flood opportunity to actually use those resources to create the large scale change.
Yep.
So the question is, where's the investment going to come, and how do we make sure that that it happens? And I think the Biden administration's done a good job of tipping its hand around questions around equity, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it's really going to happen at the sort of grass tops level, right? What are the employers going to do? What are the workforce training entities going to do? What are the educational institutions going to do? So, federal policy will be a blunt instrument in terms of moving money to states, to institutions, to others. The real action is going to take place at how those resources get spent. And I have to say, candidly, based on the experience of what we've seen with the Recovery Act money, I'm a little worried about it.
Mhm.
I'm a little worried because so far what I've seen is states and others saying, we're not quite sure how to allocate these resources. We keep saying, really? Because we have ideas about how you should be allocating these resources, because what they see is existing structures and systems and resources that they want to put into those things, instead of understanding that they should be investing in the large scale change that's needed. So, I think I do think we have. It will be a time of really intense, interesting, hopefully very productive public policy in this sphere. But I don't know. I won't make that prediction and say it's going to happen. But we will. It's unlikely that we will have as good of an opportunity as we have in 2021. I think we will look back on 2021 and recognize what an opportunity it was. And the question we're going to ask ourselves is, did we take advantage of that opportunity?
I believe that you're exactly right. I've even been seeing this on the ground. It's so much easier, if you will, for institutions, again, not higher ed institutions, organizations, to receive those dollars and backfill on perhaps where they felt there had been a shortfall. And then say, if there's any money left, then we'll think about what we might do with it. But we're going to make up for all the losses that we've sustained, not just during the pandemic, even pre-pandemic. And I think if we could start hearing from leaders across different sectors and organizations, both about ideas, what could be done, but two, what they are doing with those dollars. I think we're all looking for a little bit of inspiration right now, and it'd be great to hear what folks are doing with those dollars.
Can I just use one quick example from and I apologize for the self-referential nature of this, but at Lumina Foundation, we're trying to think about these things just the way anyone else is. And so for those of you who saw our new strategic plan that we started working on this year, you'll see that Lumina holds itself up to this standard, this public accountability standard. We describe ourselves as an equity first organization. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, what does that mean, and how do you demonstrate that? And we intentionally held ourselves to that standard because we want to say, look, we believe that we need to walk the walk when it comes to racial equity and justice. So we want equity to come first in all of the discussions and conversations and decision making that we make. If you apply that principle to the way that others in society need to be thinking about this as these resources are flowing, to states, to institutions, to providers, et cetera, thinking about that question, are we acting in an equity first way? It is a habit of mind that I think could actually in and of itself create some shift in this mindset of, well, let's wait for the people who are doing the work to tell us what they need to do. No, it's the people who are making the decisions who should be saying, show us how you are going to put equity first in whatever strategies you are going to be developing as these resources flow out. And that's a sort of small thing in some ways, but from a habit of mind perspective, I think it could be really important. It is certainly forcing Lumina as one little entity trying to do this on our own. To have really complicated, hard, sometimes uncomfortable conversations, but they're in service of something that's really, really important.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's not a self-promotional example at all. I think that's incredibly relevant to the conversation. So thank you for sharing that. Taylor has given me permission to ask his question. And so I'll jump in. He asked, Jamie, does a post-secondary degree have the same currency as it did a decade ago? And if not, how can or should the institution evolve or adapt?
You know, it's a really good question, and it's a hard question. And we all know that the signals are very mixed, right? So on the one hand, so here's my, it's late in the day for some of you. So only one data point, I promise. This is the only piece of data I'll mention today. So the March jobs report, which I think is illustrative of where we are right now, because there was a large number of new jobs created. March jobs report showed that 916,000 new jobs were created in the US economy. Of the 916,000 new jobs that were created, 7,000 went to people with a high school credential or less, and all of the rest went to people with a post-secondary credential. So that tells you something about how work continues to shift and change, and how the labor market values those post-secondary credentials. So on the one hand, you'd say, oh,
really quickly, I'm so sorry. Can I interrupt you? When you say post-secondary credential, are you talking about a credential beyond a high school diploma?
Exactly. So it's not just degrees, it's certificates,
okay.
It's certifications.
Great.
In particular, it's the things that are issued in the post-secondary context.
Great.
And that, you know how the census data work, you can't really break that down, or the BLS data. So, but I think so on the one hand, it's pretty clear that employers continue to see post-secondary credentials as a proxy for something that is really important for them when it comes to their hiring decisions, right? So that's really important. On the other hand, virtually everyone in the system is saying they are dissatisfied with those post-secondary credentials, right? That they don't do enough, that they don't show enough, that they don't reflect, what people actually know and can do. And so we have this sort of, seeming contradiction in the equation. My argument is that the more employers are able to do this assessment on their own, the less likely they are going to be to use the proxy of the credentials, and the more the currency of the credentials is going to decline. But I think it's incumbent, therefore, on higher education to do a better job of demonstrating the value of these credentials, and particularly the degrees, which I think is where a lot of the bachelor's degrees, which is where I think a lot of the fire is focused. And frankly, I think higher education has the tools to be able to do this, right? We have 3 decades of experience in focusing on learning outcomes, and we now have a taxonomy and a language that we can use to describe what those outcomes are. Let's do a better job of doing that, in my opinion, and then let's recognize where the shortcomings are. The comment that was made earlier by Marilyn about STEM, I think, is really important, right? That STEM, of course, is really important, but what are we doing when it comes to being able to demonstrate that the people who are coming out of our institutions really are ethical, they really are collaborative, they really are effective critical thinkers, that they really can demonstrate that analytic reasoning and that overall analytic ability. Those kind of things I think will be increasingly important for higher education institutions to do, or that currency is going to continue to decline as the marketplace assumes more and more of the roles that higher education probably had a quasi-monopoly on for much of the post-World War II era.
Agreed. Yes, agreed. Jihye, would you like to ask your question, or would you like me to ask it?
Sure. Kind of feels like a follow-on to this, although it jumped off of when you were talking about how, the future of AI and whatnot. We're often thinking about, well, let me put it the other way. You were talking about a shift of really thinking about skill development in terms of emphasizing what makes us human, is how I'm going to paraphrase it.
Yeah.
The ability to collaborate, compassion, the ability to take ambiguity and all of those things and wrap it around and think about somebody holistically. And so as we think about that being the direction that we need to look at, and the current state where we're, from a young age, now the curriculum is being shifted to say, hey, what we need is to learn how to code Raspberry Pi from like the age of 4 or 5. I kind of feel like the latter is emphasized because it's an easier thing to measure. And so if we're taking into account that what we really need to develop is what makes us human and lean into that and learn how to collaborate with the technology that's developing, and knowing that that development tends to be nonlinear, do you have any thoughts on the approach to take to be able to scaffold that and measure and set the right expectations around the nonlinearity around developing those skills?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is an honest no. I do not know how to do that, but I think your question is the right question, right? It is what we've got to focus on, because it seems to me that it's nice for some guy who runs a foundation to write a book talking about this paradigm of human work. It's another thing to then sort of figure out how do you actually help get there. Now, I do run a foundation, so we are starting to do some of that work. That's the good news. Recognizing that, of course, philanthropy's money is a drop in the bucket when it comes to the resources that government has, that private capital markets have, et cetera. It's just a fact, right? So the entire endowment of every foundation in the country would not fund higher education in the United States for a single year. So that's just a fact. So we face this challenge that I think is really difficult for us in philanthropy, and yet I think we need to provide the seed for the scalable change that you're talking about to actually help prepare people to do that. And that scaffolding is a critical part of what we can produce, and then work with other partners on actually helping to build on that scaffolding and help create those opportunities. But it is absolutely the right question. It's something that we are talking about at Lumina right now, and would welcome input on those kind of conversations.
Thank you. Maria, I saw that you had a couple of comments and questions in the chat. Would you like to ask your question of Jamie?
Yes, well, I think it's a bit explicit, but I happen to be working with some partner institutions, community colleges across Texas. And we're actually very fortunate that we're able to use culturally sustaining pedagogy within classrooms with great success and with little resistance. On the other hand, I'm affiliated with Yale and other folks in higher ed. And there, anytime that you attempt to do something with regards to addressing current issues and problems, you're now automatically, told, you're just into critical race theory, and their concerns and innovations are somewhat disregarded. So I do see a problem in certain circles. It's ironic that in Texas, of all places, I'm not really having difficulty implementing a program within community colleges that focuses on the students' culture, ethnicity, and the like to achieve the outcomes that we all hope to achieve. But in other settings, it is just getting worse again. And I thought after the elections of 2016, that because things were so overt with regards to racism, that we were going to no longer put down minorities for being too sensitive, that we were going to acknowledge, this is the situation, let's do something about it. But yet, the country's so divided right now. I'm just wondering how we're going to tackle that
It's
broader.
It's
level.
it's an astonishing challenge in my opinion. My view bluntly, Maria, is that most of the people who are expressing those views about things like critical race theory don't actually know what it is. And so what they are doing is using that as the latest tool in an ongoing struggle to maintain white supremacy. I mean, that's pretty obvious. And, as I said, I pardon again, another self-reference, but this is what I really did see in South Africa in incredible ways over the course of decades, which is that a true white minority was able to maintain control by essentially atomizing the country into different groups that they could then systematically control. And that is pretty much what I think we're seeing playing out now with these conversations about things like critical race theory, right? Which is to basically try to atomize the one part of the electorate to believe that this is about actually separating us rather than bringing us together. But the whole point of critical race theory is to recognize where we have fallen short in understanding what our shared well-being looks like. And instead it's being turned into something that it clearly is not. So facts be damned, of course, in these kind of political conversations. But I think it's going to be really important for us at a sort of a macro level to not fall for that, to actually continue to focus on delivering that kind of high quality learning, and to work with the willing. And I know these conversations have gotten more complex and more difficult, but it shouldn't make us any more hesitant to talk about them. And I will say, if I can say one more thing, which is that it's incumbent upon people like me, white men, to speak up on these issues and to be clear about why this is about our shared well-being, that this is not a Latino or a Black or a Native American issue, that this is an American issue, and why, I believe my children should be exposed to critical race theory as part of their learning, particularly at the collegiate level. That will be very important. My son's going to be a freshman in college, by the way, in a month. So it's all very real to me, Alison. By the way, I was joking with my staff, by the way, today, that I said, I just wrote my first tuition check and I said, boy, we've got to do something about the high price of college. And the reality is that we have to focus on the fact that shared prosperity means that people who have had the advantage have to speak up and have to be part of the solution, not simply continue to try to retain the power that they've had.
Thank you. Yeah, so thoughtful. Thank you, Jamie. I know that we're coming up on time, but I want to make sure that everyone gets their question in who joined, and wanted to quickly, Jack, if I could turn it to you. I saw you had a question in the chat. Would you like to ask Jamie your question?
Sure, thanks. They say, demographics are destiny, and people and places mean something. Baby boomers are moving out of employment, right? Second largest generation. Millennials have been stalled because the baby boomers were slow, but yet they're leaving, and they're leaving in big numbers. Replaced by the post-millennial generation, which is small, followed by a birth problem starting in 2007. So we just have fewer people coming into the system with a big group leaving. What, just from a dynamic standpoint, where do you see it? It feels to me it raises the stakes of adult attainment.
Yeah.
Doesn't lower them. It actually makes it more critical. Because on balance, we'll just have fewer educated people in America in 10 years than we do right now, or that we did 10 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And by the way, it's one reason why, Jack, you see that in our new strategic plan, 90% of what we are investing in is adult oriented. It's investing in learning for people over the age of 24. If that's what you want to call adults. So, I think that's really, really important. And to add to your point, I actually think that the real question is going to be that, given the changing nature of work and the tasks associated with work, it's untenable for us not to support those adult workers who are going to need not just one moment of quote unquote retraining or reskilling, but many over the course of their lifetimes, because we're going to need them in order to continue to do the work that in prior generations, I hate to sound so blunt about it, but we could ignore some of the adult workforce because we knew that there were people coming behind them. We literally, to your point, can't afford to do that, which is why we're going to have to make these investments. And that is exactly what we are trying to focus on at Lumina, particularly through the lens of community colleges right now, which is we have this big imperative to do a much better job of bringing people into the post-secondary learning system, making it, as I said at the beginning, a worker learner centered system, one that's actually about them, not about the employers, not about the post-secondary institutions, but about them, and giving them those opportunities that they need to be successful.
Great,
Excellent.
thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I know we're right on right at time. I had, I think, 2 or 3 other questions, Jamie, I was going to ask you, but perhaps that means that you'll come back and join us another
Be
time.
delighted. Be delighted. This is a
Okay.
fantastic forum, and I'm really grateful. And as I said, I do know some of the people who participated, and I just want to thank everyone for their leadership. We're all on a shared journey here, and I'm grateful to have so many partners that I aspire to be like. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. Be well, stay safe, and happy remainder of the summer.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye
Well,
now.
bye-bye.